From the Ear to There Travel Studio, this is the Ear to There Disney Podcast.
The Ear to There Podcast, it's time to start the show. Be sure to hold on tight, here we go. Exploring all the different Disney destinations. Ear to There, it's time to start the fun.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Ear to There Disney Podcast, Walt Disney World Word of the Week. I am your host, Phil Gramlich. I'm also the owner and the founder of Ear to There Travel, which is, of course, a Disney specialized travel agency. It is my job, along with all of the vacationeers on the Ear to There Travel team, to take away all that stress, all that anxiety, and all that time that it takes for you to plan a Disney trip, so you can focus on the really fun and the really important things, like having a phenomenal time with your family and friends and enjoying the magic. You can listen to the podcast. You can meet every single person on the Ear to There Travel team, or you can get your free, no obligation quote over at eartotheretravel.com. This is kind of a special episode of the Word of the Week, because I've been waiting to do a show. Well, let's start it this way. This week's Word of the Week is brought to you by the letter M. M for monorail. Now, I haven't done a Word of the Week about the monorail, and I don't know why. I think maybe it's because I feel like I can't do it justice, and the monorail really can't be explained in my own words when I literally talk to the guy who built the darn thing all the time. So this episode is going to be about the monorail in both Disneyland and Walt Disney World. And it's going to be in some of my words, and some, of course, words of the man himself, Disney legend, my friend, Bob Gurr. Now, we do know that the Disneyland monorail opened on June 14th, 1959. That was kind of the second opening for Disneyland, because the Matterhorn also opened on that day, and the submarines also opened on that day. By the way, two other Bob Gurr designs. 1959 was a pretty busy year for Bob. So really, there's no one that's better suited to tell the monorail origin story than Bob himself. So I'm going to sit back and relax here while he takes you through the origin of the monorail.
Please stand clear of the doors. Por favor, manténganse alejado de las puertas.
So when you say that you had the opening date, like, does that kind of mean that, like, Walt would come to you and say, like, say with the monorail, for example, did he come to you with the monorail idea and say, okay, like, Bob, we're building a monorail, this is when it's opening, just go do it?
Well, yes.
Wow. That's kind of hard. It's
almost all the things I remember working on, the great big jobs, the date was already established by the time he asked somebody to get started.
Wow. Yeah, that doesn't happen now, I don't think.
Oh, it doesn't happen.
No. So what was that like when you worked on a monorail? Because that was, correct me if I'm wrong, that was the first monorail like system in this country, or am I crazy about when I say that?
No, it was the first one in the Western Hemisphere.
Wow.
Is the easiest way to say what it was.
Right. So how do you go about getting that started? Do you have a picture? I know that Walt had been in, was it Switzerland and had seen it and kind of got inspired by it, or Sweden or something like that. I'm sorry. I should have done my homework.
No, well, that's all right. You'll the longer you talk to me, your homework will get done.
There you go.
No, Walt, several years before Disneyland opened, he had a document that he was listing all the stuff he'd like to see in his Disneyland. One of them was the word monorail, but it was not specific. Also, if you look really close at the original Herb Ryman drawing, the lower right-hand corner where there's a Tomorrowland-like place, behind a building, you'll see a monorail, which is a hanging type. It hangs from a beam or a track or a rail up in the sky.
Sure.
Most people, they look and they didn't even see that. So Walt had this idea in mind, and then in 1958, he and Lily, his wife, were driving on a little road in Cologne, Germany, and this monorail goes right across the roadway, right above him, through these trees. Now he'd seen a monorail, so he immediately went over and talked to him and got started with a negotiation within just a couple days. And then he had a team of people go back over there really quick and negotiate a preliminary contract basis. Then Walt came to my office and he brought me these pictures of this pretty ugly looking railroad car that looked like a loaf of bread with a slot in the bottom sitting on a stick. It really wasn't very. I wouldn't have done something like that. It looked like front end looked like an old World War II German bomber, actually.
Wow.
And all Walt said was, in a couple of minutes, he left me the pictures and left me a couple of technical drawings of how the thing works. It's called German saddlebag beamway. And he says, "Well, Bobby, I want you to get started on this, and work with your boss. He'll get you some more help. And get started." So in a matter of a day or two, I could see the problem of the appearance of the train. This loaf of bread with a stick, sitting on a stick. We have to hide that slot. So I thought it's like a camouflage job. What can I do to do that? So I came up with the idea of a pointed vehicle like a Buck Rogers spaceship. But if you look at that old Buck Rogers spaceship, it had these sort of splayed fins, like a little kid's sled, that it would land on the planet. It just sort of slide to a halt. It's all very fantasy. But I thought, that would be a good way to camouflage the slot. We'd still have the same slot, of course, but your eye would see the pointed nose and it would see these splayed lower side fins. And then I made the body kind of roundy looking so that the fins kind of splayed out a bit, and that made the thing not look so tall. And then, of course, you have big wraparound windshield, and you put a bubble canopy on the top like a Boeing B-47 bomber. Those are the elements. That fell into place with no other sketches. I just went right straight to what I thought the answer was. I made a quick sketch on my kitchen table one morning, and then when I got into the office, I made a rendering of it, and that rendering is what you see all the time when you see the thing called monorail crossing. I made the picture, and then we had an artist, I think it was John Hench, he put the color on it. And Walt came over to look at the thing, and he just said, "Bobby, can you build that?" And I said, "Yeah." And he smiled and walked out, and that was it.
Wow.
That was the approval process.
And that picture's that's the famous one that you have on the cover of your book, and it's everywhere.
It's everywhere. I think in hindsight, if you're going very fast and you want to solve a problem, you don't dilly-dally with a bunch of alternate sketches. You don't submit them for approval. You don't get near a committee, because the committee's going to sit there and they're going to nitpick everything to death. So what you do, you go really fast before anybody knows what you're doing and get it going. And the only guy you got to make happy is Walt.
Right.
Just simple as that.
I have to ask you something too. I don't know if you're familiar with the miniature artist Robert Olszewski.
Yes.
Okay, so I have his Disneyland, his Main Street. I have the entire set. And I have his monorail piece. I haven't actually installed the working train or the monorail on my platform yet, but I have it in my house, the whole setup. And I'm right now in my office. I have the monorail piece. And one thing that stands out to me when I look at it is it doesn't have those fins on the bottom. The version that he made has those fins as it kind of looks now, but it's supposed to be a retro piece. Did it lose those fins somewhere along the line?
When you say fin, do you mean these displayed lower body part?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's what I mean.
No, all the Disney monorails have always had that fin shape, every one of them.
Then maybe I'm thinking like the tail light thing that comes. That's
what I mean.
Well,
okay.
Comes off. That's what I meant.
Yeah, you need to be more specific, because The original Mark I train was very directional specific. It had the sloped,
Right.
sloped fin, but the back, because it's moving away from you, big old Cadillacs. You always put big fins in the back. You put big fat taillights. That's a '59 Cadillac taillight.
Wow.
Blown way up inside.
That is so cool. That's how you got the idea for it. That's amazing.
Well, yeah, because it was a logical thing to do, but they were only there for a few months. One day I went down to the park and the fins were gone. But we had a problem where when the train backed into the roundhouse, or not the roundhouse, but the place where we restored the train, they would occasionally catch on the bus bar brackets and break. And the way the guys in the shop solved it was they just, the minute I was not there, they just sawed them off and buttered it up, and we were done. And I was so mad about that.
I'm sure.
But it does tell you in a timeline which photographs are which in the early days of Disneyland, which ones have the taillights and which ones don't.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
Right. And then obviously because of the when we go to the Mark 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 monorails, they are bi-directional, because it's a simpler way to do it.
Right. Right.
But I got away with what I wanted before anybody stopped me.
Nice. It's all about the speed. Get it done fast. I saw this. Speaking of monorails, I saw a tip on YouTube, or a clip. I'm sorry, not a tip, where you talked about the higher ups or the people who were kind of running the show when you were building the Walt Disney World monorail were worried about the vibration of it coming through the contemporary main building. And I was wondering if you could share with me and with my listeners the story of you getting the test drive the monorail.
Yes, I think a lot of architects and civil engineers, they think of overhead trains. They immediately think of the Chicago L, which is a big vibrating rattle trap of a system. And they assume that a monorail going through a building would cause the same kind of noise and vibration and disruption. They would not believe that a monorail with the suspension it's got with rubber tires and a very high-density concrete beam, there's going to be no detectable vibrations imparted into the building, but they still wouldn't believe it. So there was an agreement made that this was 1971, pre-opening. In fact, it turned out to be Labor Day, where all the construction crew would be away for the day. That we picked that day to set up a seismograph. We had a seismograph that I had the company buy several years before. It was called an AR-240 strong motion oscillograph that's used for measuring earthquakes in buildings. But we've been using it for testing vehicles in order to figure out all the ride forces. So we bolted this big old box, bolted it down to the concrete deck, and then I was supposed to drive the train while a couple of people there were to operate the seismograph. So the idea was that I would go through the building at wide open power and how fast as the train would go. And I remember coming in from the south side, and there's an opening that the train passes through. And I'm going about 42 miles an hour, and I thought that opening is too small. You're going through the mouse port,
Yeah.
Oh, I went through there, and the train I never saw such a sight. I went through that hotel. I didn't even take 10 seconds to go through the length of the building.
Man.
And then on the radio, they said, "Okay, looks good. No, we're not getting any data. Come back, do it again." So I went around for a lap and came back around again and did that. And it turned out the seismograph didn't detect anything. But my hair was standing on end at the end of that session because I was the only person of record ever went faster than 5 miles an hour through that building.
Oh, man. Did you get anybody to film it? Did they film that for you or anything?
No, this was a secret test. We had it ready. Labor Day, nobody's there except Dave Gengenbach, who's the monorail manager, and a couple of civil engineer architect guys.
I kind of wish I could see the video of the monorail going through there that fast.
Yeah, we didn't have video in those days, really.
No, yeah, I guess you wouldn't. Yeah. Well, that's such a cool story. I heard it before, but I wanted to hear you say it just because it is. I mean, that's amazing to be able to. I can't imagine seeing that little hole in the side of the monorail. I mean, I'm sorry, inside of the Contemporary, and thinking, "Uh-oh, I might not make it through here." That's got to be.
Yeah. Well, it was such an outrageous thing that we had to do that I have today an absolutely vivid memory of doing that. It's a vivid memory as strong as when I got a ride in the P-51 Mustang years ago. Those kind of things where you're doing something really fast that, man, your recording disc in your brain is just soaking it all up forever.
We welcome you aboard our highway in the sky and hope you've enjoyed the Magic Kingdom.
And if you want to know a little bit more about what went into Bob's inspiration or his design for how the original monorail looked, here's Bob answering a listener question a while back about what inspired him when he created the first Disneyland monorail. So this is from Chris in Long Island, and it says, Walt enlisted you to design and build the first Mark I monorail trains. Where did the idea for the look and design of that train originally come from?
It was about a 10-minute sketch on my kitchen table about a day or two after Walt asked me to get started on it. As I would appreciate much later in life, looking back at how I did work, I could see that when I'm asked to do something, I don't have to sit there and analyze it or get facts or get specifications or follow orders or anything. You just suddenly start thinking of something, and all of a sudden the designs just appear in your head, and you can't draw fast enough to put it down. It was quite obvious, the monorail that Allweg was designing and building. It's a square-looking thing, and it looks like a loaf of bread with a slot in the bottom sitting on a stick. It's not very elegant. And Walt had brought some pictures of that to me and said, well, Bobby, I want you to get started. And no further explanation other than that. But we could see the general size that it was going to have to be to fit in Disneyland. And this slot in the bottom of this square-looking bus-like thing, I had to hide that slot somehow. So, following the comics of the 1930s, I was quite taken with Buck Rogers. And one of the things, there was a rocket ship in Buck Rogers that had what I would call sled runners that were on the lower side of the vehicle, but they were kind of splayed outward a little bit. Much like a sled that the kids would use on, snow or ice. And this pointy nose, like the Buck Rogers rocket ship, I could actually hide that slot by literally camouflaging it with these fins. The other thing was the Allweg train was vertical sides, which made it look awfully tall. And I thought by taking the body, the pointed rocket ship nose and having a little bit of tumble home shape to the body where it kind of curved inward by, like the waistline, and then it flared out sideways a little bit with the, the lower fins, that made the train look not as tall. It made it look more slender. And then I couldn't sketch that thing fast enough. It was a clear and simple answer in my mind very, very quickly. And then I think it was on probably on the weekend, and then I came in, the next work day, and I made a big drawing of it. And that's the drawing that everybody sees everywhere. It's on the covers of books, and, they sell posters of it. That's how fast that idea came about, just like that.
Yeah, Bob, a friend of mine and I just had a toast to you the other night when we were in Walt Disney World at the Top of the World. They had your sketch up there right behind the bar. So I said,
yeah, I was amazed years ago when I was there, and somebody says, "Hey, why don't we go up and get a martini up there, and you can see your old drawing." And sure enough, they'd taken that drawing and stretched it out, so it would fit a bunch of glass panels. So they had me autograph it, and then it turned out about a week later, the janitorial had erased it. And then the next visit I was there, they said, "Oh, well, why don't you do it again?" And then I did that, and then shortly after that, maintenance people actually broke the glass.
Oh.
So they had to redo that, and then I think about the third time they said, "Okay, we got it rigged up now, so you sign it, and they'll put a coating on it, and with orders, don't touch that." So I was there in September, and the first thing the people did, they took me up there and says, "Look, it's still there."
It's so cool to see it. Like I saw it on my last trip. I didn't really I don't know. I didn't like admire it as much because I kind of it was kind of background. But this time I was looking for it specifically, and yeah, you can't miss it. It's the centerpiece of the whole room. It's really cool.
Yeah, what you got to do is go up there just at dawn. The bar is closed, obviously, but you go up on the top deck on the west side, and you look through the windows, and now the thing is backlit.
Oh,
and that's when you want to take a photograph, because if you got a fairly wide-angle lens, you can get the whole darn thing in there. But when it's backlit, the thing is just gorgeous, because you don't really see the bar that much, but you just see this monorail glowing in the dawn.
Will they let a nobody like me up there at dawn, or do I have to be Bob Gurr to go up there at dawn?
No, you got to befriend somebody there because they got a really high security in that building. You have to check with the security in the lobby, and then somebody has to verify who you are, and then they walk you to the elevator and unlock it and let you in.
Right. Yeah. I'll just tell them.
Once you get up there, then you're on the top deck outside.
Right. I'm just going to tell them that Bob said it was cool and see what they say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Disney's Contemporary Resort is a popular site for meetings and conventions. For great shopping and fine dining, visit the Grand Canyon Concourse.
And finally, here's Bob telling the famous story about the monorail and Vice President Richard Nixon. Enjoy.
We're building the monorail, and 2 weeks before we were going to dedicate it, we got the train set on the beamway. And in that 2 weeks, we finished assembling it and testing it every day, and it broke down every day, except the day before the dedication. We were also going to have a 90-minute black and white live TV program, and the monorail had to perform with that ribbon cutting. And so I parked the monorail right at the platform rather than taking it back to the service area, because I knew that if we were going to have a live television to get their shot, all I got to do is have it drive away far enough so it's out of the shot, and then it could break down again. It'd be okay. That was the plan. But about 11 o'clock in the morning, a really hot day, here comes Walt, and he's got security with him, and oh my God, he's got the Vice President of the United States, his wife, the two girls, and some Secret Service guys. And Walt wanted to show off something he had that nobody else had. So he came up and looked at the train, and then there was he says, "Well, Bobby, let's go inside it." And I said, "Just give me a few minutes. I got to turn the air conditioning on because it's pretty hot." So as soon as it got cooled down, I opened the door, and we all piled into the cab. And so Walt introduces everybody all the way around, and Nixon's a good friend. He has his name. He calls him Dick. In fact, I got a copy of the letter to the White House. Say, "Dear Dick, bring your wife out. We're going to cut a ribbon. If you need more room in the hotel for your security guys, well, I'll give that to you." So anyway, he says, "Well, Dick, I'm the steam guy. I drive the steam locomotives here. But this is new, advanced, modern electric transportation, so I have Bobby drive it." Pause. "Well, Bobby, give him a ride." I just drove off. I drove off. And in those days, the train would go out, make a right turn, then make a left turn, come back down over the subride, which meant Nixon could see that on the load platform, all the Secret Service guys, I think it was 4 or 5 of them, they're there, which meant none of the Secret Service are in the train. Now, of course, there's a presidential history fact that the presidents always wanted dump the Secret Service, try to escape, and they never can escape. I mean, it's just one of those things they always want to do and they can never do it. And apparently Nixon caught on in an instant that he is successful. He has escaped the Secret Service. And of course, he let out some 4-letter words, which I can't remember. And then we came around the platform, and I thought, oh my God, it was the guy going to stop back where the ribbon's going to go. And then the girl said, let's go again. And Walt says, give him another ride. And I can't even remember the second lap around. I was heartsick that, oh my God, we're going to miss the shot. Can't get the ribbon cutting. And besides, if it catches on fire again and it catches on fire over the sub ride, we don't have the evacuation ladders or anything out there. We'll burn that president up. Of course, that would have saved him all that Watergate later. But
true.
Yeah, well, we got back to the platform in a second lap, and we all got out and walked down the end of the platform, and Nixon turns around, and he looks up at the platform, and would you believe the Secret Service guys were sitting in the train, because when I went through the first time, they were running with it, trying to get in it. They were that desperate to resume their duties of protecting the president. But anyway, it was kind of funny. And then I went back up the platform, and a German engineer that had been helping me from time to time, a guy by the name of Konrad Deller, the guy was just furious. And he says, Mr. Bob, in Germany, we spent 7 years and 7 million marks, developed the monorail, and we never let the public on it. And you stupid Disney people, you get it running one day and you put your vice president on it. And he was furious. And I said, Conrad, this is the Disney way.
Wait, so it had been on fire recently, right before that?
Oh, yeah, we had trouble with that every day. But Conrad and I would go over to the hotel at the end of the day and drink a bottle of Christian Brothers white wine, and then we'd sit there and make sketches of, well, what part should we get done? And then a Disneyland truck would drive up to the studio at midnight, put the drawings in our graveyard shift at the shop, and then the next morning, the other Disneyland truck would bring the parts down in the morning, and we'd install them in the train, and we resumed the tests again. We did that every day for 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
And then came the day that the next day is the live TV program, which certainly was not going to, nobody knew Nixon was going to be in it. But I was just concerned that I need to park it where the ribbon cutting goes, and then the train can drive off and break, and everything will be okay.
That's a great story, Bob. Thank you for telling me. I know you've told it a million times, but I appreciate it. And that is going to do it for this week's episode of the Ear to There Disney Podcast, Walt Disney World Word of the Week. Thank you so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this episode. The monorail is probably my favorite thing about Walt Disney World and Disneyland. I've had a fascination with it since I was a little kid. So I hope you enjoyed this show. I hope you enjoyed hearing all about the monorail from Bob. Like I said in the beginning, who better to tell the story than a guy who was there? He did it just a much better job than I would have. So again, I hope you enjoyed the show. Thank you again so much for listening. If you did enjoy it, I would really appreciate it if you haven't yet already. Go to Apple Podcasts, leave an honest review and rating over there. The more people that do that, the more people will see and listen to the podcast. So I really appreciate it. So yeah, please do that if you haven't already. Just remember, there will be a new episode of the Ear to There Disney Podcast next week, as well as a new Walt Disney World Word of the Week. So until next time, have a phenomenal week this week. Thanks again for listening. Bye-bye.
Ear to there.